Good evening and welcome to what we're going to call the season finale of Now What?
Very grand, isn't it? I like it that we haven't got to do much and then get a season finale.
No, it's a very short season. There's no idea yet whether we'll be renewed. I'm Martin Saunders. I'm part of the team here at Youthscape.
And I'm Rachel Gardner. I'm also part of the team here at Youthscape. And we wanted to ask you for your season finale what you're eating.
Oh yeah, season finale dinner.
Is that a thing? Do people do that when they have season finales?
I think there'll be many people this evening, because we'll get onto this in a minute. There are many people with us this evening. But if you're having like a special meal to celebrate the end of this event, maybe I'm thinking too highly of us now.
I know it's
I feel like if I was on the other side of this, I would be definitely like, this would be an excuse to get a takeaway. Get a few, youth workers round at 1 metre distance in the garden. Yeah. Good save. And then I have a takeaway. So, and what people love to do is they love to like take a photo of their dinner and put it on social media.
Yes, of their food.
So this is one way that you can get involved in the conversation right away this evening at Now What?
But actually, I'd really love it if it's things like beans on toast. So please, could your season finale food be like pot noodles? That feels very much our kind of thing to do, doesn't it, as a youth ministry?
Well, whatever, you do you.
Yeah, whatever. That's
okay,
it, you do you.
If it's a great takeaway, if it's something you've made yourself, just hashtag it, NowWhatYes, put it on your favourite social feed. We'll pick it up and we will know whether people are having beans on toast or some magnificent kind
Talking of
cuisine.
Takeaways, do you remember when the lockdown eased in your part of the neck of the woods and you were the takeaways open, the drive-thrus open? Do you remember that?
Is this you going on about McDonald's again?
So basically, there was one day where all the takeaways, all the drive-thrus open on the same day. So with my two kids, we had drive-thru breakfast from a certain coffee place. We had drive-thru lunch, McDonald's, and then we went to the fish and chips for tea and sat outside and we ordered fish and chips. I remember going to the garage thinking, I need to get some vegetables for my kids, so I bought a cucumber. But it was a mighty day, like a terrible day in parenting land, but like a mighty day of like, I've not had to cook any food all day long.
You look at Rachel Gardner and you think classy, but then you get to know her.
Oh no, we know full well there's nothing classy about
me. So, amazingly, we've been going just for the last 24 hours. This is the final session and we've been blown away by how many of you have joined us from right around the world. It's been amazing to have people watching all over the UK and far beyond. We've actually, we were expecting just a few people to join us. We've actually had thousands. So hello to you. Thank you for joining us. Please keep letting us know where you're watching us from. We'd love to know sort of who's furthest away. That feels like the sort of thing you do at a conference.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah,
so let us know as well. Now what YS is the hashtag.
Yes.
And also we just mentioned, before we do something proper, the Now What resource, which you've probably all got a copy of or can get a copy of free to download when you register at youthscape.co.uk/nowwhat, is also available as a physical copy. You can get it from the Youthscape store, youthscape.co.uk/store, and it's a...
Am I allowed to attend to a typo at the back? Because you might just be very... we put this together so fast. It's extraordinary. The dates for satellites is wrong. But apart from that, it's all good.
That's the wrong dates for satellites, but otherwise it is an absolutely
it's an extraordinary resource. It's an extraordinary
resource. So do get that. Also, we just want to keep hearing from you. What has made this event for us, and probably you as well, has been the amazing amount of interaction, the conversation that's been going on among this beautiful youth ministry community. And so please keep getting involved on the comments on YouTube, on Facebook, where we're broadcasting, or you can hashtag us NowWhatYes. Let's do something sensible now.
Fantastic. The question is, what has God been saying to you during Now What? Brilliant. Well, it's so important, isn't it, for us that God is at the centre of this, and just knowing that He is with us, inspiring us by His Spirit, like leading us on, beckoning us into the future that He has for us. And our heart, really, when we put this together, was saying we don't know what the future holds, but we want to be leaders that have that posture of readiness to say yes to whatever Jesus invites us into. And so we're going to worship God together. And we're going to do it again just through listening and engaging in a little bit of spoken liturgy. And so partway through, you'll see some letters come up a little bit darker. That is the cue that you can speak out loud. But you can read it all off if you want to. But that is the part where together, all of us, like thousands of us, maybe all of us at the same time, speaking those words out. So Jesus, we welcome you by your Spirit. You are absolutely at the centre of this today and always. And thank you that you draw close to us now.
Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. If you say, "The Lord is my refuge," and you make the Most High your dwelling, no harm will overtake you, no disaster will come near your tent. For He will command His angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. Because He loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation.
Lord God, we thank you for your presence with us over this event. We praise you for the things you have revealed and spoken already. We honour you for the stories that we've heard about what you have already done. We worship you because you are worthy of all our devotion. We welcome you, ancient God, into our digitally enabled midst. All we do, today and always, is for you. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. We do not presume that our big ideas or new innovations will be enough. We know that without you, we cannot hope to see transformation in our world. Lord, we run to you, not just for help when things are tough, but for sustenance for the journey and the power of your Spirit when our hands and feet are not enough. You command your angels concerning us. We would be foolish to think that we can do this on our own. God, we return to you again, our source, our strength, our all. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Lord, we seek to understand and comprehend the breadth and width and depth of your love for us, and we fall short. But we know that you have loved us, the young people that we seek to serve, and this broken world with an everlasting love. We call on your name, God of love and power, to transform us again as we seek to bring your transformation into a world that has spun off its axis. Though the mountains may fall into the heart of the sea, we will not fear. Surely you will save us. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Amen.
Oh man, what a wonderful way to start this session. Thank you to the team that put those reflections together. We're going to introduce a brilliant first guest in a moment. I'm just going to tell you what people are eating this evening as they're joining us virtually. So this is the list so far. Mexican pizza, barbecue burger and wine, ice cream, lentil bolognese.
Oh, that's classy.
Beer, I presume not eating that. Lasagna, garlic bread, pasta, flapjack, spag bowl, fish fingers, sausage mash, tea and cupcake. And the list, ladies and gentlemen, just goes on and on. And so far, this is amazing.
We've got people from Colombia, in brackets South America. That was for my benefit, I reckon.
Well, there's a Colombia in America, isn't there?
Oh, I see. Okay, all right then. And Worthing, Morecambe, up near where I am, Birmingham, Colchester and Wigan, to name a few. Wow. Welcome. It's so good to see you.
Please do get involved in the conversation this evening at Now What. What we'd love to particularly hear from you, and it kind of ties into the theme of this final session, is we'd love to hear from you what you think God has been saying during Now What, and perhaps before in the last few months. What have you heard God saying? Yeah. Would you share that with us this evening? We'd love to hear as many of those comments and thoughts as possible. But we're going to go to our first guest now, and I know we're all excited about the possibility of another Zoom in our lives. Joining us by Zoom, it's IJM's England director, Esther Swaffield-Bray.
Yay! Esther, you are so welcome. Can you please tell us a little bit about International Justice Mission? What do you do?
Well, hi guys, it's so lovely to be with you, and hi Youthscape crew. What a great few days. But yeah, my name's Esther. I help to lead IJM, International Justice Mission. And in a nutshell, we are the world's largest anti-slavery organisation. So we work all around the world, on the ground, in the trenches, finding and rescuing children and families from cases of human trafficking, of modern slavery and other forms of violent injustice as well.
So what would be your sort of everyday direct work with young people around the world in sort of, in inverted commas, normal times?
Well, we live in a strange time where there are more people in slavery nowadays than there have ever been in history before. And out of around the 40 million that we estimate are in slavery today, around a quarter of those are children. So young people are affected by slavery, by human trafficking, by exploitation. So we do direct casework as IJM. We work with local governments, local authorities to actually find and rescue those children. So whether it is a young boy on a fishing boat in Ghana or a teenage girl in a brothel in South America, or kids in rice mills in South Asia, we'll get in there and we'll get them out, and then we'll help them to heal and recover and love them back to life, essentially. But then we work on the other end of the scale of the problem too. So working with governments, working with police, how do we fix the broken system? So it's both this kind of like big scale transformation, where's the gap in the system work, and actually rescuing the families, the individuals, the kids themselves, and seeking kind of kingdom transformation through doing that.
So it's an amazing organisation, it's amazing work. In normal time, all the work that you've been doing over the last few years. This interview has come out of a conversation we had on the Youthscape podcast a little while ago. And you started to talk about how things have been different but still awful for some of those young people during this time of pandemic, and in ways that perhaps we might not imagine or have foreseen. Trafficking and the exploitation of young people around the world has taken on a new and really sinister form, and it's not light subject matter to start this evening with, but it just felt so important to talk about it. So I wondered whether you could just tell us a little bit of that story.
Sure. I mean, lockdown was meant to make us safe around the world, wasn't it? We were told to stay in our homes to be safer. And the sad reality with that is that actually all around the world, for many, many people, particularly young people, lockdown has done exactly the opposite of that. So what we've actually seen during the last few months is a sharp increase in exploitation of young people, and particularly of the most modern form of modern slavery being online exploitation of children. And just to paint a picture of that, what that actually is, this is difficult stuff, but it's the live sexual abuse of young children. Typically, in a country like the Philippines, actually is the number one hotbed of that around the world, directed by a predator. Here in a country like the UK or America, or in a more kind of developed, wealthier nation. And basically what we've seen during lockdown, where people at home in countries like the UK have too much time on their hands, and children in a country like the Philippines are locked in with their perpetrators, it's basically created the perfect storm for the online sexual abuse of children to happen. And what we've seen over the last couple of months is more than a 4 times increase of referrals. Just this crime has absolutely exploded. And it's pretty heartbreaking, if I'm honest. And our teams are in there still working with police, still rescuing kids. We did a rescue just a few days ago where 7 children were rescued. The youngest was 2 years old in that rescue. Boys and girls were brought out. So, it's really challenging stuff. And it's kind of heartbreaking to think that as we as a country are locked down, that's what's the outcome.
And also involving perpetrators from our nation. And that, I guess this is heartbreaking for anybody who hears that story. For those of us who work with young people, give our lives to young people, it just takes on a special extra level of kind of pain and heartbreak, really. And so just tell us, first of all, how your organisation, IJM, are responding. Because you'd said, actually, this came out of me asking you if you'd been furloughed. And you said, well, we couldn't. Because there's still all this work to do. Yeah. And so how have you been responding?
Yeah, I mean, in some senses, if this work wasn't urgent before COVID, it's as urgent as it's ever been now. And that really was our conviction as a movement, is that if we're not needed now, almost like when are we? And over the last few years, we've rescued close to 53,000 individuals. And during lockdown, that is still our conviction, to be Jesus' hands and feet in the most darkest of situations. And our human nature says to run in the opposite direction when we see pain and things that aren't safe. But that's our conviction, that us as Jesus' hands and feet should be in there with the most vulnerable and those who are most unsafe. So we've been partnering with the local police. We've been doing full rescues, everyone in PPE and so on, and working to rescue these children. Both in the Philippines, actually, rescues around the world have been going on, but that case in the Philippines, where we've seen just rescue after rescue after rescue happening, and now of course the long work begins of actually journeying with these children to freedom and to healing. And it's one thing to be physically free, but these scars go really deep, as you can imagine. We had a young woman actually share her story. Some of you might have heard on Radio 4 a couple of weeks ago. We'll call her Ruby. And she was one of the children that we've rescued fairly recently. And she went on the Today programme on Radio 4 and shared about how she's no longer a victim, but she is victorious. And that line really stuck with me. And I think that's what we want to see, isn't it? All around the world, is that young children who once were labelled victims actually know that they're victorious. And that's been a real encouragement to us as a team, for sure.
So Esther, I mean, IJM do amazing work. Yeah. This, since you first told me the story and a few weeks ago, it hasn't left me. I found this incredibly difficult. And so we wanted to do something as a youth ministry community in this moment. And so I want to say, first of all, IGM haven't kind of asked to come on here. They haven't paid us any money to do this slot or anything like that. We thought this was really important, that we as a youth ministry community could just try and do something as an act together, just because of the horror that we're hearing here, because we love young people, we give our lives to young people. And so Esther, what can we do tonight?
Well, thank you. And thank you for, as a youth community, actually looking outside our immediate context as well, because that is so important, isn't it? And just if you want to respond tonight, if that's something that you're getting that heartbeat faster thing, I'd love to encourage you to give generously. And you can actually, help fund rescue operations like those ones in the Philippines. You can do it really easily. If you want to pick up your phone, you can text send rescue and then follow it with a 10 for £10 and send rescue, and just send that to 70085. If you do that now, you can do it as many times as you want, if you wanted to do that more than once. And you can also do that via IJM's website. The details will be up in a second, but that is ijmuk.org/give/now. So you can either text send rescue followed by a 10 or however much to 70085, or do it via the website ijmuk.org/give/now. And of course, you want to find out more about IJM and connect with us and see how we can work together moving forward. You can find out how to do that on the website too.
So just to make that really clear, because I'm an idiot, you put in the text code 70085, and then the text is just send rescue 10, and you'll get £10, and that will go directly to that work that you've just described. So we've both done that. If you want to do that at home, it would be an amazing thing to be able to see just what, as a youth ministry community, we could raise and do together in one evening. So please join us and do that. Esther, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bless you guys. Thank you. Speak to you soon.
Wow.
Fantastic. That is very moving. And it is really hard to hear that, isn't it? It's really hard to hear of anybody's pain. And it is difficult, but it's so incredible also that there are things that we can do. We can be people that bring hope and see the kind of change that releases children from the horrors that we don't want even to be thinking about. So thank you so much. It'd be really good to hear some people's responses to what they feel God has been saying through lockdown. So please do be sending in your thoughts, your insights. This is a real chance to encourage the wider community about what it is that we're seeing God doing and what he's stirring within us at this time. So loads of space tonight to share those with you. But it's really exciting to be welcoming our next guest, who is Dr. Lucy Shuker. And I think, like many of us, it's Lucy's first time in public for a very long time. Is that right?
Yes, it
just
is.
To put it out. I mean, you're doing ever so well. Can I just say? You're doing good.
I mean, I started walking in the wrong direction just helplessly for a while. But somebody grabbed me gently by the elbow.
That's why the arrows are on the floor. It's not about COVID. It's just about the fact no one knows what to do down the roundabout. So, Lucy, you are the director of the Centre for Research here at Youthscape. I mean, you are much known and much beloved, let's face it. But in case anybody doesn't know what the Centre for Research does, what do you guys do? What the team do?
We do research, Rach.
There we go. Next question.
Brilliant.
No, that's a fair question. We do a few things. We try to collect research that's relevant to youth workers and share it with them in a digestible way so that you don't have to trawl through research papers. We try to shape the wider conversation on the basis of evidence, so that rather than just kind of circulating myths about what things might be going on, if we know something about it, we actually throw that into the ring. And we create new research as well. So we try to keep our ear to the ground a little bit around what kinds of questions feel important, what are people wrestling with, and then we do pieces of research and we share that back.
Oh, fantastic.
Now, people might know of a couple of pieces of research that you've done. Just want to name a couple of reports that the Centre have released in the last few years. Yeah,
well, we try and do a sort of bigger piece of research every year or so, a couple of years. So the first one was Losing Heart, and that was a survey of about 2,300 churches. It was a big piece of work, huge, and really evidence that there was a lot more confidence in children's work than youth work, and it stimulated a lot of good conversation, which was great. We then did No Questions Asked, which was an exploration of whether the kind of apologetic style stuff was scratching where young people were itching. And that, again, was interesting. We found a very low levels of curiosity, at least on the surface, when we talked to young people, although the story changed the longer we spent with them, maybe unsurprisingly. And then most recently, we've just released We Do God, which is an exploration of the role of practice in youth ministry.
So we released We Do God during lockdown, but it happened before
Yeah.
COVID-19.
Yeah.
But interestingly, we are asking, all of us are asking like those big questions, aren't we? Like, what is the future of youth ministry going to look like? So from your sort of vantage point, being the centre director and sort of being very close to this piece of research, what have been some of the things that you've drawn out of this research that you think is really specific for what we're doing now, asking those big questions? Are there any sort of links we can make?
Yeah, I mean, it's the first question is immediately: is this still relevant?
Wow.
Because we did this we did this survey and did these case studies in 6 months ago in December. But you go back and look again and think, yes, but I see it now through a new lens. And so some of the things we were responding to in doing that research was existing research that really showed that experience is the gateway to belief or truth. That, and we're familiar with the kind of ideas of postmodernism, aren't we? That there will always be young people who will say, like, show me the proof, explain it, and then I'll get it through that kind of classic apologetics approach. But for many of them, it's, have I experienced it myself? Is it real in my life? Can I see the visible difference? And if not, then you do you, essentially.
Yes.
And so we, in trying to explore whether there's something about this idea of an experiential apologetic, so can we, rather than put the kind of the explanation first, the kind of this is what you should believe, we say, join in with this, see what difference it makes in your own life or in the lives of people around you, participate, reflect. This will sound familiar for people who've done, been trained in youth work. It's not rocket science. Try it, reflect, and then decide what are you going to do next. And so actually now, when we're thinking, well, what's happened is the format has blown up, hasn't it?
Yes.
So our form has disappeared. And when your form disappears, suddenly you get to ask the question again, what was it we were actually trying to do? So I know how we did it, but now we no longer have to do it that way. We get back to the why were we doing it again and what was the goal. And I think what that potentially means for us when we think about the We Do God research is it takes us back to kind of first principles around young people experiencing God and discipleship in terms of following Jesus, and kind of takes us away from some of the habits that the church tends to get into around socialisation. Just keep them there, just keep them entertained, just keep them happy. And it takes us much back to that kind of space of what if we built youth ministry around following Christ, or at least joining in and deciding whether you thought his claims in practice meant anything. Taste and see. So is the Lord good?
When you do a bit of research and this sort of thing comes out, and then COVID-19 happens and lockdown happens, and you're sat here sharing this with many youth workers that are here saying, yes, instinctively we do that, or we know that. Like, what does it make you feel? Like, what are you feeling about this new learning twinned with an opportunity to actually do something quite radically different? How do you carry this? How do you hold this?
I feel a huge sense of the future that you can sort of see out of the corner of your eye and feels incredibly compelling. So I think, there are all these things that are coming together that feel like they're a huge opportunity. So young people need to develop experiences and practices for their own well-being. They need to learn how to live well in a time when so much has disappeared. And Christian life and practice has a depth of tradition to offer to young people, alongside loads of other wonderful things that psychology can offer and can happen in school. We have a story to tell about expressing suffering, about lament. We've got a story to tell about how to deeply rest and know that you are acceptable through Sabbath. And we've got a tradition of challenging injustice. We've got all these things to speak to young people. So it feels like there's this kind of mental health well-being opportunity thing. There is the fact that young people are attuned to issues of social justice. And I think we'll put up less and less and less and less of a church that talks and doesn't do. So, I mean, if anything might happen here, if we get challenged to be a church that does before we speak. In the We Do God research, we found that was out of balance. We talk about Christian practice more than we actually do it, more than we invite young people to experience it. And that's not on youth workers' shoulders, because that's the whole culture of the system. We're in this kind of dualistic way of seeing knowledge, where it's teach about it and here's the application. And so there is this there's this opportunity because they will not put up with a church that is hypocritical and passive, especially in light of what's happening in this moment. And young people need to be given practices to know how to live well. And we need to reattune ourselves to what God asks of us as well. It's not just about attendance, like Tim said yesterday, was it? Maybe it's about more than that. And so there's this huge sense of opportunity, and yet there's this huge sense that but structures perpetuate themselves. So how is this really going to happen? And I don't know the answer to that. But I mean, I have a lot of faith in the community that's out there that's doing this day in, day out and listening. And so if anyone can do it, you guys can.
But in a sense, like this, as you said, just to return to your first point, some of those structures wobbling a bit, some of those safety nets being taken away, this could create an opportunity for us to do something with this research, or as Rachel would say, lean into.
Lean into.
Is that right?
Oh,
this research.
Leaning everywhere, lolling over all of it.
I guess what do you think, making it really granular and practical, like what could this research be nudging us to actually do with young people?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the things I've sort of imagined could happen off the back of this is what if there were communities of youth workers who saw what they were doing as communities of practice first and foremost. So we're not saying in that the Bible's not important or the story of God's not important or the community's not important. You bring all those things together, but it's a community that forms itself intentionally about doing. So when you come along, if you want to join in, you're going to see very quickly what this community does, and you're going to be able to name it because it's going to get real very quickly. So one of the things that makes that quite practical is you could start naming what are the practices that make us distinctive and make us different from any other social group that you could be part of. So you could say, and the interesting thing is you might say, what are the practices that would make us faithful to the teachings of Jesus if we are a Christian group? You might say, okay, we're not a Christian group, but we've got a group of young people who care about the world and want to look after each other. So what you could say is, what does this community need and what does this group of young people need? They need to learn how to forgive each other as friends. They don't have the tools to do that. So forgiveness, that's going to be one of our practices. They need to learn how to lament because they're experiencing huge brokenness, and this is a community. There's no space for that. So we're going to be a community that expresses grief. We're going to be a community that prays because actually young people have an appetite for prayer, even if they're not Christians. So it's about getting very practical, and then as you go on a journey of doing together, you say, do you know why we do this? Let me tell you a story.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
We all want to join the Youth Scape research team right now, don't we? This is so exciting.
I got absolute goosebumps then when you were talking.
Awesome. So the last question on our list is like, so what's next for you? What's the next bit of research? I mean, can you reveal that? Is this ahead of the game?
I can.
Oh, you can? Oh, good.
I can, no. So we're partnering with Tear Fund, actually, our wonderful friends at Tear Fund, who they have been trying to kind of shake the church by the lapels for a while, haven't they? Saying something's happening with the climate. And one of the things they've said to us is, we know young people, we've got anecdotal evidence that young people really care about climate injustice. They care about the planet, and it matters to them that the church does something about it. And some of them are leaving because they feel like their passion is falling on deaf ears. So we're trying to explore whether or not that bears out, essentially. Is that the case? So we've probably all at some point said, young people are passionate about the climate and social justice, but we're actually going to try and find out if that's true. So it's a survey for 14 to 19-year-olds who consider themselves Christians, and it explores their experiences of lockdown, their thoughts about the future post-COVID, about the climate. And we're hoping, although, young people will say what they will say, so we'll see. But having looked at some of the answers, we've got about 500 in so far, they are saying this matters. I mean, it's unsurprising. Racism, they are talking about racism, discrimination, climate change, and these things are not separate. They go together. And so this is related, isn't it, to practice. This is a generation that needs to see the church acting, not catching up with society 20 years later when everyone's done it and it doesn't cost you anything, but leading the way. So please do that survey. Sorry, that's the thing. Can I just say, so if you know any young people, particularly outside of London and the South East, where most of our contacts seem to be. So if you're anywhere outside of London and the South East, if you work with young men or anyone who's not white, turns out lots of our friends are white, and you want to share that survey with them, The link, I think, is in the Facebook page, and you can go to youthscape.co.uk/youth survey, and would love your help to get it out there.
Brilliant. I shared it with a few of the young people that I work with, and one 17-year-old girl, she looked at it and went, yes, 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 yes. Like, she really was so excited that her faith and this issue she was passionate about suddenly was like, oh yeah, it was incredible actually. So I think do it and see what is stirred and what's raised. Thank you. We don't let you go.
No, we have to let
you
go.
We've got
so many other things, honestly.
You have to take that fierce footwear and head off that way. The
Thanks.
arrows are pointing that way. Thank you so
Thanks, Lucy.
much, Dr. Sugar. Amazing. Well,
was I a bit rude then? That sounded like I wanted to get rid of it. I didn't mean that, Lucy. Come back.
Go back. No, stay there, honestly. So much power behind the desk. So people have been sending in messages. Anthony says that he really sensed that God has been saying to him to try and start detached youth work in Worthing. I mean, Anthony, you've gone public on that. It's going to happen. That's amazing.
Wow, so this is from Marie. This is incredibly encouraging. God has shown me that I'm not on my own.
Yeah.
That is huge, as I've felt very overwhelmed and very frustrated
you,
and on my own for the last 6 months. Bless you, Marie. Thank you for saying that.
You're not alone. Laura says, I think God is wanting to show me that he really is enough for me. Hard to let him be that because I really want all his people too. But God is enough for us. That's a powerful lesson, actually, isn't it, in this time?
This is, again, we're just asking people this question, what has God been saying to you during Now What? And we've had so many answers. Please send them in. We'll find space to share as many of these as we can. Mike says, lockdown throws us back onto our core personal relationship with God, using time, which we've had a bit of, to explore him.
Absolutely. Naomi says, God's been speaking to me about what my focus is. Naomi was really encouraged by Tim Alford last night. I want to be building disciples and need to reassess if what I'm doing is actually doing that. I mean, that I think so many of us really felt that challenge last night.
We'll get onto this in a moment. We've had some coaching today. Mel says, my one-to-one session really helped me put my work and personal life into sharp relief. Brilliant. And that I need to look after myself before I can look after and care for others. Oh, I don't know about you, but I feel a lot of people, myself included, have probably put ourselves last because we've had slight hero complex in this time and not looked after ourselves very well.
Because we care for others. And I think we're just so conscious, aren't we? People have been working very, very hard. You need some rest over the summer, dear friends. Please take some rest. Joe says, for me, God has been saying that moving forward, the partaking in and facilitating of long-term discipleship and mentoring relationships between the young and old is going to be essential. I love that, Joe. That's powerful.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, everybody.
So please keep sending those in. But we've got so much to get through this evening. It's amazing. And we're actually going to have two amazing talks in the next hour, which you do not want to miss. No. Believe me, if you've got something planned, cancel it now.
I mean, here we go again. Here we go again.
I'm sorry, I've been very direct again.
But don't go anywhere. No, it's good. It's good stuff.
But we've also got some brilliant people joining us now. And with us, actually, on Zoom, we've got Andy Windmill. Andy is the Director of Urban Devotion in Birmingham. And Andy's been heading up a conversation along with Tim Evans and others this afternoon that's been taking place on Zoom, I think. And Andy has been leading that through, and I hope he's going to appear now via the magic of Zoom. Yes, he is. Look, there he is.
Oh, you've got strong lockdown hair and that beard. Andy, that's grown longer, hasn't it, in lockdown?
It had a trim yesterday. I have a lockdown hairdresser, so my wife's been cutting my hair for 17 years.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's very good. Andy, so thank you so much, because you've been hosting these conversations about what next for the last couple of months, haven't you? And we're so excited that you kind of segued this one today to coincide with what's happening today. So what were you guys in a nutshell? What were you chatting about?
I mean, I think probably one of the key themes for us has been learning, and I think that's come through other conversations that we've had through these couple of days. So really the what next conversation started a couple of months ago with my friend Tim Evans, who's part of Worth Unlimited. And we were just sharing ideas, we were sharing stories, we were sharing heartaches, and we thought there were a whole bunch of people more clever than us. And so we thought we'd invite a few people to join us. And then that escalated, it became a whole lot more people. And so we hosted a conversation a couple of months ago, and we were just inspired by people's perspectives. And so then we brought it into what you guys have been doing. And it was just great to listen to people and hear their fantastic wisdom and inspiration.
So you had another one of those gatherings this afternoon, sort of folded into the Now What programme. So what were some of the key themes and things that people were talking about this afternoon?
I think one of the ways I'd capture it is in the idea of simple innovation. And I know you love your innovation, Martin, and it's easy in innovation to set the bar really high and to think that we've got to stumble across the next amazing idea. But I think what we've heard is so many different people in different parts of the country, in different contexts, who are innovating in a really simple, everyday way. And actually what's happening then is young people's lives are being transformed. Similar to some of the other conversations that you guys have had, it's been hard. Let's be honest. I feel like I'm going on holiday at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, driving down to Devon. And if I'm honest, I feel as though I'm on the last fumes of a 4-month adrenaline rush. And so I think in the honest sharing between different people who have been working really, really hard, actually it's good for us to own the fact that it's been difficult at times. I was just pondering this a little bit earlier on. And like many people, I watched Hamilton 2 weeks ago. And I have to apologise to friends of mine who are youth workers who I've sort of chuckled at in a slight, I'm a urban council estate youth worker, like musicals, what's that about? But I watched Hamilton and I decided it was okay because it was hip hop based. But one of the things that that they said in Hamilton, which I just thought about all through this afternoon, there's a line where Angelica says, you want a revolution, but I want a revelation. And actually, I think that captures so much of our conversations because we don't actually quite know what to do. I loved what Tim said last night about the fact that it really isn't about programs. And there's a phrase I heard a while ago that said that we no longer need to think about progress, but we need to think about presence. And so in all of these conversations, a common thread is just an absolute desire that God would break through and that we would begin to see things as God sees things. So I think that was probably one of the keys that came through for me.
That's like, Andy, don't go anywhere because we want to bring in another friend, Mike. You might have seen Mike last night on the After Hours. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Mike works the 267 project in St Albans. This man is, and the guys are so fantastic at encouraging youth leaders, speaking to youth leaders' heart. And you, during Now What, have been kind of overseeing the coaching element. So 44 people having coaching. So what were some of the themes that came out today, Mike?
43, because one lovely lady who's pregnant had to take a bit of a break. But what the coach said, I'll ring you back next week and we'll carry on our conversation.
Not having the baby, but
not at that moment. That would have been a great moment.
Okay.
So I did. Obviously, we finished about 7 o'clock. So I've sort of harassed my coaches to get stuff out of them. So we worked out about 30% full time, 70% part time volunteer, which I think is probably similar to what we've seen at Birmingham. And I just sort of loaded down the key things that I think weren't just things spoken about, but almost the sort of heart behind some of them. So there was a real sense of how do you get the whole church to get behind your youth work. And there was a couple of conversations that people were having that when we start opening up, whatever that means, people are saying, well, we need to get the proper church, the adult church first, and youth work second. Okay. And so there was this frustration that actually they're ready to go because youth workers are a little bit more like that, aren't they? Yeah. And yet they weren't being allowed to open up to that. And so there was a couple of conversations around the whole church sort of really getting youth work. And that was a little bit of a thread that fell on a few people. A lot of people were thinking sort of post-lockdown, it felt like literally starting over again. Like you've gone all the way down the snake, you're back on square one, and you're like, okay, I've just got to start over. And again, we've talked about this before, there is a lot of weariness. You know, we had this one person who said, I'm struggling with joy and purpose in my ministry. And it broke my heart because I thought, if you want a ministry that should be full of joy and purpose, it is youth work because it should be. So what is her environment? So I was sitting there thinking, how do we surround people? Because she's probably one of dozens that would echo that saying, actually, and another person was sort of compounding that, was saying, actually, I'm not sure whether God's sort of on my side sort of sense. And I think, okay, that clearly just says to me, you're on your own too much. You haven't got the sort of group around you to cheer you on and keep you through it.
It's very hard though, isn't it? I mean, I totally sympathise with that because, you know, I I have really missed young people. I didn't think I'd ever say that, but I have. I really missed just hanging out and playing dodgeball and having them try to steal tuck, stuff like that. Like I miss actually hanging out with, because it's our core purpose, isn't it? It's like what we're called to. People, Like I'm sure we all have this sense of like just longing to get back to the thing that we've been doing before and the thing that we felt like we were made for. So it makes total sense that people are saying these things.
And I think the other thing is, I wonder to, if I talk to you about youth work and you about youth work and everyone watching about youth work, we get excited about youth work. But what about all those other sort of circles of influence in the church that are equally excited about, some things that are equally valid, some that we think quite clearly youth work is more important. It's how do you talk to them to say, actually, this isn't about youth workers getting excited about youth work. This is the whole church getting behind the idea of youth work and saying, what do we need to do as a whole church movement to be able to get behind? And I sit there thinking, well, wouldn't it have been great to go back to, what was it, the early 90s, when someone at HTB said, why don't we do a course where people can ask any questions? And then something happened and everyone went, that's a great, we need to do that. And then 25 years later, a trillion people have done an Alpha course and every church wants to run an Alpha course. And I'm thinking, well, how do we have a conversation so that churches go, we need to stop doing A, B and C and we need to be doing youth work because it can have a significant impact on the entire planet as Alpha has done. And I think, how do we have that conversation?
So you've had in your coach conversations with 43 people. I mean, what little nutshell would you give to all of us listening who maybe were like, actually, that's me too. I'm feeling tired. I've lost the joy. Like, I'm facing like issues around the PCC or the kind of DACNA. And like, what would you want to say, like, for people who are kind of feeling, I'm not sure I can talk to you about this?
I mean, email me. I think it is. You've got to find that person. Because I shared something this afternoon. I recorded something this afternoon because two guys came into my mind, Matt and Paul. I think I've shared about this before. Who took me out for dinner every 2 weeks in my first 2 years of ministry. Every 2 weeks, and they, whether I was feeling amazing or rubbish, whether I'd had success, they'd sit me down and say, Mike, you can't just keep on playing games. You've got to talk about Jesus occasionally. They were those people. But actually, without them, I'd have probably been struggling with joy and purpose. So I would say, Paul and Matt, wherever they are now, we're all a little bit more older, but you need to go and find your Paul and Matt, or let yourself be open to being found. So hang out in youth work networks, talk to other groups, hang out with charities like Anders and ours and yours, and say, I just need to meet people so that I don't feel like I'm on my own.
And that kind of backs up what I think it was Marie said in the comments just now about just having spent the last few months having felt a bit alone. And I think one of the wonderful things about bringing the community together for this very strange conference online is we've been able to gather and have that sense of, look, we're all here, even though we're scattered. We're by the Spirit and by this calling that we share, all one. Andy, thanks for hanging on with just a magnificent beard. I feel like the grooming on that thing is you could be. Do you remember Guess Who? Do you remember the flip game? Guess Who?
Yeah, with
I feel
the
like you could very much be a character in Guess Who.
He's like, I'll take it.
That might take us off the rails slightly, but so the theme this evening really is asking ourselves, where is God's Spirit moving ahead of us? What is God saying at this time? Not necessarily. It's what you just said actually. What is? It's not a revolution, but a revelation. What is God saying? And I wondered if I could ask both of you actually this just as we finish this section. Andy, what do you feel like the Lord is saying? Maybe over these couple of days, maybe over these few months. That you would say, that's something I feel God is saying and doing right now?
It's a great question. I think one of the things, and I felt this actually when I was sat in our Zoom call this afternoon, I sat there and we had a little technology fail, but I came back on and there were all these faces looking out. And one of the challenges of Christian culture is that we're used to a platform and we're used to an audience. And actually, you guys are amazing at this because you're humble, you're grounded, you lift others up and you point to Jesus. But as soon as we have a platform and an audience, we create distinctions between people. What I've seen happen time and time again over the last few months, which is what I believe God's teaching us to be as a church, is to genuinely listen. and not to listen to the people that may look or feel or sound important, but to listen far more broadly. I think that the George Floyd murder, I think Black Lives Matters, I think the fact that there are parts of our society who've been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it's all pushing us to say that there are voices that we're missing. And actually, Mike's point earlier about the two people that, I can't picture those two people. You probably can't picture those two people. But there are voices that I think that we're going to need to tune into. And so we will be hearing what God is saying in unexpected places. And we need to be ready for that and really eagerly embracing that.
That's great. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
How about for you, Mike?
I think I'm not saying, I don't want to over spiritualize it, but I do think I was taken straight to Nehemiah. So Nehemiah's, and it was because the person said, I feel like I've started my youth work from scratch. I'm thinking, well, okay, if I've got to rebuild something, I want to rebuild it not only so it is fit for purpose, but that actually the building process, a bit like Andy was saying, is really inclusive. And every time I look at Nehemiah, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, there's builders, there's families, there's artists, there's people whose sole job is to protect the builders. There's this whole bunch of stuff going on, but to one end. And I wonder whether that just speaks into the whole thing about actually how do we get the whole church, not just youth workers and parents excited about youth work, but how do we say actually you're not an actual youth worker, but you're part of the church. I want you to build with me. Like Andy says, I want to know what you think about this. And I wonder whether we're always going to youth workers to ask what they think, and we need to be asking the generation below, above, current, and just say, actually, we want to build, so we need different people to be able to build. And every time I read that book, I think it's 42 tribes, they've got different skill sets, different sizes, old, young, new, and they just joined together, single purpose, and had each other's back. And I think there was something in there.
So amazing. Cara said earlier, didn't she, from Hot Chocolate Trust, she said one of the things they say to young people is, what can we build together? And I think that's such a beautiful question. What can we build together? That's what you're
and there is a sense of, in all of this, and what Lucy was just saying about maybe new directions we could take in terms of thinking about practice. It's what Kenda said earlier on in the day, our bricks have become sand. There's a reset that's happened. And there's now a moment. There is a moment where we could follow the Spirit into completely new territory.
Dangerous territory.
Which is kind of where we're at this evening. So it's very exciting to be having these conversations. Let's keep having them. Have an amazing holiday.
Yes, Andy, we bless you. We bless you on the motorway as you go, that you can let go and trust God. We just bless you. We'll be thinking of you in the early doors tomorrow.
I really want to flip you down like a Guess Who piece.
Stop it! Oh, for goodness sake.
It's not Andy.
That was fantastic.
He hasn't got a beard.
Thank you.
Great to see you guys. Take care.
Bless you. Drew has just commented and said to us, I've just been encouraged that all my struggles as a youth leader are not unique to me. This may seem simple, but you know who has also been having a field day in my head. Oh, yes. Also, it's been good to hear about what racism is like and how it affects people. It's also just been great to be part of this conference, Drew. We're so glad that you've been part of this conference.
Absolutely. Joe says, someone shared at Everyday Racism with me, and I saw on their an image on their Instagram saying silence is violence. It really challenged me to educate myself on racism and not rely on my friends to do it. That's great, Joe. Thank you.
And Ralph said he's felt that God has spoken to him about working smaller with the ones and twos, the smaller groups. And we really picked that up after this morning, didn't we? That theme about going after the one. Mark said, God has been saying to me, the church is not shut, but in the community is kind of real unleashing.
A little bit of a longer one from Sarah. I'm encouraged to hear other people's experiences and struggles being similar to mine. Yes, I think that's been the wonderful thing about this. I also feel I'm coming to the end of a 4-month adrenaline rush. Thank you, Andy. Really challenged by Tim's message yesterday about reassessing what we're doing. Is it really discipleship? And I'm thinking for the first time about doing some detached youth work alongside online and hopefully face-to-face in September.
Do you know, so many people that's really resonated, that moment. Tim said, what is this? That cut to the heart, didn't it? Actually, this is what we're about. This is what we're being called to. Real discipleship, and lots of us asking questions about that. I mean, this is good. This is good stuff, isn't it?
This conversation will end tonight in a sense, but in another way, we'll find lots of ways to keep having it. And one of those ways...
Oh, I saw what you did there.
See what I did there?
That was very slick.
Is we have a weekly podcast that we do. you and me,
We do.
called the Youthscape podcast.
Just witter on.
We do. Well, there is wittering.
Sorry,
What you witnessed right now, it's very much a sort of template for what we do. And we get on a guest every single week from the wonderful youth ministry community, which mitigates us wonderfully. And you can just skip ahead to that bit. But you can get it every single week. And we're up to like edition 174, I think. So if you join it now, you could go right back to the start and you could work your way through. It's like finding a series on Netflix that you've never watched before, and you find there's like 9 seasons.
But like, you know when you watch The West Wing and you watch the entire, is it 10 seasons?
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm really glad I did that, but I won't get that time back in my life again.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like, that wasn't a very good plug I just did there,
7 seasons.
For the Youthscape. Listen to it and you won't get that time back again.
Just forget that. The Youthscape podcast is always available to you on your favourite podcast provider, but you can register for updates and to get it every week just by visiting youthscape.co.uk/podcast. It would be a great encouragement to us if you did that, but also, it's a great way that we can continue the conversation.
That's very much our heart, keeping the conversation going, talking about this stuff. Brilliant. Okay. I feel like I need to take a deep breath. Do you? And I'm really excited about this next guest. She's absolutely brilliant. She's a bit of a shero of mine. And I've had lots of conversations with her during lockdown.
It's a shero?
A shero is a female hero, because hero is he.
Oh, a shero.
A shero.
Okay,
so,
sorry.
And Laura Hancock. Laura is the Director of Missions at Youth for Christ. We love Youth for Christ. And Laura is also a youth worker, a researcher. She's an absolutely brilliant speaker. And Laura now is going to be just helping us think about our spiritual lives as we step into this new space that God is opening up for us. So thank you, Laura.
Hi, my name is Laura. I work for an amazing organisation called Youth for Christ, and I am based in Halesowen, just outside of Birmingham. But this evening I get to be with you, which is an absolute privilege and honour. And for the next few minutes, I want to talk to you about rhythm and disruption in rhythm and realignment of rhythm. But before we get there, I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you, do you carry a lot? Now, yes, I do mean metaphorically, but I also mean physically. Now, if you were here in my offices at Halesowen, where we are at Youth for Christ, then you would see me probably at least twice a day running around the office with my arms full of stuff. I like to optimise my time. I like to make the most of everything I'm doing. And so often I will be running around with a laptop, and on top of the laptop will be balanced a notebook and my iPad and a pen and probably some lip balm and a mug, and I will be weaving in and out of the office. And these things that I'm carrying, this load I'm carrying, is balanced to precision, optimising the amount that I can carry and the speed at which I need to move. But every so often, there is a disruption to the rhythm that I have created. Something will happen to disrupt this rhythm. It might be that a door flies open in my way. It might be someone makes me jump, or I trip over my own feet, which I do a fair amount. And what will happen in that moment is that everything I'm holding will fly up into the air. And there's a part of my brain which has to make a decision about what do I save and what do I let fall to the ground. And my brain often will go for the thing that it considers to be of most worth and most value. That is the thing that I cling to, and I will let everything else drop. Now, if you work with me, you need to know that it's always my laptop that I cling to, and the mug never had any tea in it. I would never dream of mixing electrical equipment and liquids. But this is what happens. We have these moments when things fly into the air, and we have to decide what we will cling to and what we will let fall. I don't know about you, but the last 6 months feels like a real disruption in rhythm. And I don't always think that disruption is bad, because disruption in rhythm can often mean realignment of rhythm. You see, I do believe that God has a rhythm that he has created for us. And as we now come out of lockdown, I think that this is an opportunity to find out and pray through the things that we will cling to that we have learned, and the things that we will let fall to the ground as we create new rhythms and maybe realign our rhythms back to the rhythms that God intended for us. You see, I do believe that God has intended rhythms for humanity. In the autumn, there was a real spotlight put on the topics of rhythm and rest and Sabbath, and there were some excellent books released and resources released and podcasts and talks, and they weren't new things being said, but it was kind of put at the forefront of our attention again. And as we went into lockdown, these things quietened again. Why? Because we found a different rhythm, a slower rhythm. Now, I'm not saying that lockdown has been restful for everybody. I don't have children, but I have friends who do, and I have watched people try to parent and school and do their job, and it has not been restful. But it is a different rhythm. And if you are someone who maybe hasn't heard much teaching on this idea of rest and rhythm, I want to just give you a 2-minute quick download on a small amount of what is in the Bible. You see, God speaks continually about rest and rhythm and Sabbath throughout the pages of the Bible. But if you just look at the very start of Genesis, just those first 7 days of creation, you learn so much. And so if you haven't heard teaching on this, just lean in for a few minutes, just while I kind of bring you up to speed a little. And so there is this seventh day, which I'm sure you're all very aware of, which is this seventh day of rest at the end of creation. And I always imagined God like collapsing in the corner at the end of a very productive week and him just being exhausted and kind of clawing back his energy. But of course, that isn't what rest and Sabbath is about. You see, this seventh day is the day that God declares as holy. The rest of creation was good, but this seventh day is holy. It is a day where God celebrates and delights over what he's made. And it's not this tag on at the end of the week, but it's the pinnacle of creation. And this rest, this Sabbath, is as crucial to our human existence as the light, air, water, plants that have come before it. Just as we need those things to survive as humanity, we need this rhythm of rest and Sabbath. And it is not just a tag on, because this stillness isn't just at the end, but it's there at the start of creation as well. At the beginning of time, there is a stillness, and the Spirit of God moves over the waters. And it's out of this place of stillness that creation is formed and born. And so you have stillness at the start, you have a stillness at the end. And often in the Bible, when things are sandwiched in that way, it's a roadmap. And the design is it leads you straight to the middle of that roadmap. The verse, like smack bang in the centre of those two verses, those two sections. And in this story, the verse that's right in the middle is Genesis 1:14. And I'm going to read that very briefly to you now. In Genesis 1:14, it says, "And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and for years." And the word used there for seasons can also mean festivals, but it can also mean Sabbath. And so you have this story with Sabbath and rest and stillness at the end, at the beginning, but also at the very heart of the creation story is Sabbath. And in the creation story, we don't talk about day and night. We talk about evening and then morning. Why? Because in Jewish culture, your day starts the night before. Your day starts with rest in the evening. And so you go to bed in preparation that the work and productivity of the next day comes out of that place of rest. I don't know if any of you, like me, are a bit of a Netflix binger, but if you've stayed up late watching Netflix, I know the next day it suffers. Why? Because this is how we were designed, for rhythms of rest and Sabbath, from the day to day and the week to week and the month to month, but also year to year. This is how we were created, the rhythm we were designed for. And so you follow this story of the Israelites and the Jewish people throughout Genesis, and then you go into Exodus, and you see these guys in Egypt in a narrative of slavery. And one of the threads of slavery is that you can't have rest. Sabbath is not an option. You are forced into labour, forced into productivity, forced to keep going, producing in this narrative of empire, of just doing more, creating more. And God sees that this has become the narrative of his people, and he removes them from this narrative of carrying so much. He takes them from there into a desert, into a place of stillness to relearn a new rhythm. But the problem is, even with the disruption in their rhythm, the Israelites keep looking back, keep wishing back to Egypt, going back to the rhythm that they were a part of previously, this rhythm of productivity, and they don't manage to learn these new rhythms of rest. Even while Moses is in conversation with God, learning almost the beats of this new rhythm in the Ten Commandments, and one of them being around rest and Sabbath, the Israelites are off taking the jewels and the gold and the jewelry that they took from Egypt, forming it into a calf, and even then looking back to what was. You see, God had absolutely no issue taking the Israelites out of Egypt, but getting Egypt out of the Israelites was much more difficult. They kept looking back, kept turning to live back to the old rhythms of productivity and doing. And so, what does it look like to break a rhythm, to change a rhythm? Honestly, I think it takes discipline. And so as we had our rhythm disrupted going into lockdown, as things begin to move and crank back up again into new rhythms, it takes discipline to know what we will cling to and what we will let fall to the ground. Now, I'm not great at the whole discipline thing. I have tried reading lots of books on discipline, and in the end, the thing that motivated me to read books on discipline was not being the person who was so undisciplined they couldn't finish a book on discipline. But as I have done this, I have learned some absolute gold. That actually it's discipline that sets you free. That in discipline you learn new things. And once you begin to master stuff and you begin to set God's rhythm, you learn new things about yourself and about God. You see, you cannot be a part of the solution where you are still a part of the problem. And by putting disciplines in place, you move closer to the solution, closer to the rhythms that God has originally created us for. And it may well be that it's the discipline of rest and the discipline of Sabbath and the discipline of moving away from productivity that we need to instill into our lives. But maybe it's other disciplines. Maybe there are other things in lockdown that we're really aware that God is calling us to live in new rhythms of. An example of that would be, I want to solve the narrative of consumerism in our nation, that we just consume more and we aren't concerned that people aren't paid the right wages or don't work in the right conditions. We just buy and consume and fill our planet. But I can't be a part of the solution if I'm still a part of the problem. And so during lockdown, I became aware that I was probably Amazon's biggest customer. Just ordering packages off of Amazon, they're coming in plastics that won't biodegrade, and not looking into the rights of the people who created this stuff in the first place. And all of a sudden I realised that I'm a part of the problem. I'm a part of the consumer culture, and so I need the discipline in there of simple living, of frugality, of living and finding a different way to be out the other side of lockdown, because I can't be a part of the solution if I'm still a part of the problem. Maybe your discipline is around forgiveness. Maybe your disciplines are around identity, and as maybe you've been furloughed or you're concerned about your work and whether you will have a job going forward, there's been questions around your identity raised, even in terms of trying to parent and trying to work. Maybe the discipline is around the discipline of loving your husband or your wife and creating a home that is a loving environment for children. As we as youth workers are kind of looking after these kids from broken homes, our discipline is creating a really loving home environment for our children to grow up in. What are the disciplines that God is calling you, the rhythms that God is calling you to live by out the other side of lockdown? You see, I don't know about you, but I can feel the rhythms changing around me now. As lockdown eases, I can feel the rhythm begin to get quicker. I can feel almost on a treadmill, like you're running back up to the pace you were in. But in this moment, I believe we literally have a window of weeks where we make that decision to what we're going to cling to and hold on to, the rhythms we're going to keep, and what we're going to let fall to the ground. This is that moment when you have tripped and everything has gone up in the air, and you get that split second to make a decision about what will stick and what will fall. And I wonder whether God has rhythms for you that he wants you to take on out of this season. I wonder whether he wants to grow in us disciplines that we would mould and ask God's strength to help mould us into rhythms, into life rhythms that God intended us to be like, that we would be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And so I wonder whether you want to take a few minutes just to consider and reflect. What will you cling to? What will the rhythms that you will continue to live by, and what will you let fall? And sometimes discipline means digging in your feet and being really determined and not letting something go. And so maybe just take a couple of minutes. You could even write down all of the things that were your responsibilities before you went into lockdown, all of the things that you were carrying. And maybe there's a few things on that page that you think, I could put a line through that. Or maybe there's a few things as you look back over lockdown that you see, yes, that was really interesting that I responded in that way. It's really interesting that I picked up that habit. Or maybe there's some stuff that you valued and you know that God wants that to be a rhythm of yours going forward. So I'd love you to just take a few moments of reflection. You could grab a pen and some paper, or write it on your phone or your tablet with a pencil, and maybe make a list. What will the things be that you cling to, and what will you let fall as you realign your rhythm to the rhythm that God created you for?
Wow, thank you so much, Laura. Just recognising that some people might want to just do that now and just take a piece of paper while we're continuing to chat. That's absolutely fine. Yeah. But we've actually got Laura joining us now on the line via Zoom, not from what somebody described on social media as the garden of a Los Angeles party.
Very glam.
Hello, Laura.
Hey. How's it going?
Yeah, it's good. How are you this evening? Can you just tell us about what you had for dinner? This is the important question of the evening.
Yeah, so I was in with someone else this evening. Like, I had pizza as well. I know there were some pretty impressive offerings earlier on in the evening, but I was also on the pizza bandwagon.
Very good.
But did the thing where my husband had one and I had the other, and then we did the half and half thing because we both thought the other one had the best pizza.
Yeah. It's a real thing.
Sounds great.
It's real. Struggle's real.
Sounds like a great way to do it. So thank you so much for what you shared.
Fantastic.
We wanted to, as we think this evening about the future, what God is saying, it felt so important to just turn the spotlight on ourselves again and just make sure that we're in a good place from which to lead. And so I guess the thing is, I know we've all heard 1,000 times this idea that you're only as good a leader as the depth that you're leading from. You know, you can only disciple young people as far as you yourself are being discipled. But it's slightly disposable, isn't it? That's a bit of a throwaway kind of phrase, but it really is true, isn't it? Like you can't do this job effectively of leading young people to Jesus if you are not also yourself in a rhythm with Jesus.
Yeah, completely. I think I was just reflecting actually as I was listening back a while ago. I heard someone speak on Matthew 25 and the oil in the lamps and the parable where the virgins run out of oil, and actually our responsibility is to keep the oil piece in our lamps, that no matter what it is that we face, actually you will react and respond out of what you have in your tank. And so if we're not ensuring that there's enough oil in place, there's not enough spiritual lubricant inside of us, then actually we're gonna really struggle and we're gonna creak. And I think I would say some of the stuff that we've spoken about this evening has come out of maybe a year where I've not been as responsible as I should have been with some of my spiritual disciplines and on it. And I think you do notice, you creak, and you don't do life and you don't do rhythm in the way that you're designed to.
I guess the beautiful flip side of this, Laura, as well, is if the truth is that actually we lead out of that place, then, oh my goodness, imagine what could happen if actually we do centre ourselves in God and we do that discipline. Like actually, and it's not about what we can do, but what about what God can do through us. I guess picking up on what Lucy was saying earlier, sometimes maybe we need to experience it first and then, in that sense, taste and see. Because I think you're absolutely right what you said in your talk. You said about I wanted to finish a book on discipline because I didn't want to be the person that didn't finish the book on discipline. Like we totally resonate with that because we know this, and then we beat ourselves up about it, and then it all becomes this horrible cycle, self-perpetuating cycle. Whereas if actually maybe we just said, I'm going to give myself a whole day, no screens, going to feed my soul and just see what that does in me. And I guess, I mean, have you had those moments where actually you've just had to fling yourself into a new rhythm and think, I don't know if I can keep this up once a week, but I'm going to do it at least now and see what happens. Have you ever had that experience?
Yes. I mean, and do you know what's interesting is I think at the beginning of lockdown I was really mindful of this stuff. So I think when I realised that I was going to be in my house like for months and not going to see anyone, it was all going to be screens, I started doing really sensible stuff. Like I started planning in evenings where I didn't watch television, or our meal times would be screen free and our phones would go away. And then as lockdown has continued, and I think it's sort of morphed into normal, the good disciplines have kind of gone. The constant self-evaluation of how I'm doing, why did I react like that? Those things kind of go out the window. And I think, as you say, it's maybe just picking one thing and doing a day at a time. And not beating yourself up. I mean, there's the thing around being hungry, angry, lonely and tired as well, and being really self-aware. And so I know when I'm tired, my self-discipline is horrendous. I think someone on the chat talks about accountability as well and the importance of that. And I think just aiming even for one thing, to do one thing positively in one day and being held accountable to that makes a massive difference.
Brilliant. So we would love to hear your questions for Laura, your comments on this subject particularly for these next few minutes. We've got a question here from Beth who says, how do you operate when the church you're in is stretched in a ton of different ways? The culture, I guess, of the church is there's little chance for rest, particularly for volunteer workers. How do you make space for some of the things you're talking about?
And that is so difficult. And I think it's even more difficult when we believe wholeheartedly in what we do as well. So passionate that your heart is broken for it. You just want to do and you want to serve. I think it's not easy. But I think remembering what it is that you're called to is really important. So even as a church, so what is it that God has called us to do, and really streamlining into that and going, okay, well, asking some questions around, are we delegating well? Are we doing things that are additional to what God is calling us to do? Do we need to be doing those things, or is it distracting us? And I think being willing to let things go sometimes is really tough, actually. But saying, you know, it may be that we're not in a season to do everything well. And so what is our why? What are we going to do excellently in a way that our leaders are excellent as well? And our leaders are alive and spiritually in the best place to do stuff. But I think it becomes hard. I remember years ago, Rob Bell, ages and ages ago, said it's not about what you say no to, but it's about what you say yes to. And I found that really, really challenging.
We'll go to another question in a second, but there was a comment there from Lizzie who says, love what Laura says, just so hard to implement, especially when everyone around you is pulling back to the old rhythms instead of looking for the new ones. It's hard, isn't it, to be the person who's maybe going to take a bit of a prophetic stand on this one.
And I guess the prophetic stand is the right way to see it, actually, isn't it? Actually, we can, and in that sense, that permission giving, actually, if we begin to experience these new rhythms, that can be permission giving for others to do it as well. Absolutely. Drew asks, should churches strive to get back into the building and the familiar rhythm, or should we go with the flow and trust it's God's will to move us out of our comfort zone? Come on, Laura, you could get the church out of the building.
Here's a big question.
That is a huge question. But that is a good question about, like, what is it that in this season, what will be the implications really of us moving out of this with this new rhythm of grace? Like, so the question, I suppose I want to sort of segue from Drew's, like, what would be your hope be as we grasp this new rhythm and say we want to pursue it even though it's hard? What would your hope be? What would you want to see really as a fruit of that?
I think it comes back to in the Old Testament, God gave the Israelites laws to live differently and look different to the rest of the world, and Sabbath and rest was a part of that. And I think what does it look like for us, for Christians, for followers of Jesus, to be people who look different, who as exactly as you said, have grace with each other. Don't make someone feel bad because they need to spend a night with their family instead of pitching up to do something. I think there's an element of some of this as well where we, as you said, we show who Jesus is as we are at our best, as we are rested. And so I think it's us finding the rhythm that we were created for. And so whether that be because of rest, whether that be because of another, the discipline of generosity, but people looking at the way we live, young people looking at the way we live and going, there's something about that makes sense. And so, but we have to really do it as a community because you run alongside each other. And so as the person next to you speeds up, you start to speed up as well. So I think it is almost owning this as a community, owning this as a body, and keeping accountable to each other in it.
Absolutely.
So that's great. If that's possible, if you've kind of got people around you who are willing to go on that journey as well. Aaliyah asks this question: how can I encourage others to take rest when the church leader doesn't encourage it, and I am seen as the odd, awkward, rebellious outlier for suggesting it?
Keep suggesting it, Aaliyah. I think that's
Aaliyah, why would you give me that question? Aaliyah promised me she was going to watch this and eat ginger nut biscuits, and she's giving me a difficult question. Man, it's difficult. I think it's really tough when your views are different to leadership in your church. I think there has to be conversation between you. There has to be a place that you get to. I think in that, because I think as we've talked about, it's really, really tricky when other people are kind of setting the rhythm and you're trying to catch up with it. And you equally don't want to be seen as undermining the leadership in your church. And so I wonder whether there is a bigger conversation there that needs to take place with leadership and bringing in other people where necessary to have those conversations. But rest is a biblical thing, and
it's that
really, really difficult question.
I mean, Andy earlier talked about this is a season for simple innovation, gentle innovation. And I wonder if, actually, what I'm hearing from you, Laura, and just picking up from friends' comments is actually maybe this is the time for the gentle practice where we say, okay, maybe starting with changing the leadership and their approach is not where we start, but actually if I just begin to adopt the gentle practices of rest and I just begin to do that, I think what influence could that bring? And I guess for each one, even though we often feel so powerless, we are leaders, which means we have influence. We might want to have more influence than we do, but we have influence. And actually, as we begin to adopt these practices, and then we bear the fruit in our own lives, there's more to come. The bishop of our area, Bishop Jill Duff, talks so passionately about what's a prevailing wind, what's a prevailing idea. Well, let's work in direction against it, not against the people, but let's say if that's what everyone's saying, it won't happen here, we can't do it here, well then let's be people that say it will happen here, this can happen here. And I guess that shift in heart and focus is part of this rhythm, isn't it? It's
absolutely. Absolutely. Laura, we could talk about this for another half an hour. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You've given us so much
for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So
you guys are doing an amazing job. Thank you so much for all you're doing. I do see you as well. You're brilliant.
Thank you,
Thanks, Laura,
so much. Wonderful.
Wow.
So much, again, deep breath. I mean, but this is what I love about just the comments from friends is that we're really digging into some of these things, and there are lots of genuine things that we're facing, but that piece of hope in the midst of this, Martin, that actually God can make a way, things can change. This is an exciting part of the travel. So it's really exciting because we're going to talk tonight about something that launched yesterday, Satellites, which is the new Youthscape event that we're going to be running next summer, and we are so excited.
We are excited,
aren't we?
I'm going to be more animated.
That's
I'm going to do jazz hands this time.
I'm also, I'm not allowed to touch, obviously, but he's got a pocket. I'm just always so intrigued to see what might be in that pocket. There's nothing in that pocket, is there? It's just a pointless pocket. Is that right?
This is a pointless pocket.
You're not going to pull out a free ticket or anything for Satellites?
I can't do that.
Oh, what a shame, what a shame. But we're joined again by Natalie, who's recently joined the Satellites team and is making this happen. So can we bring the first question to Natalie? Would that be okay?
If you like. We're going to talk about Satellites.
We're going to talk about Satellites,
yes, which
launched yesterday. We pressed the button. We saw Martin sort of almost physically pressing the button on Satellites. And so, Natalie, Natalie, you've fairly recently joined the team.
I am, I'm a newbie.
And we know that you are absolutely sold out for this. And so what is it about the Satellites event for young people next summer in Peterborough Showground? What is it that is exciting you about this?
Oh, there's actually so much that excites me. I think, first of all, like you say, I've only just joined the team, probably here for like a month, and seeing Youthscape and how everyone works and how people just love young people, I think is so key for an event like this. So it's so great that it's built on such a strong foundation of a team, and you know I'm part of the team, so I'm gonna say it's great. But even if I wasn't, this is what I would say. But I think it's the fact that the Satellites team, we're a strong team. We love young people. We want to see the best for young people. So I think, first of all, that is a great start. Second of all, I'm just so excited that next summer we can gather, after this summer, unfortunately, of things not happening, for us all to be able to gather, but for just young people from all different walks of life, all backgrounds, can gather to just love Jesus. And my heart is about equality and diversity, and I love that one of our values is injustice, and I think that is so important. We have some incredible values that you can see kind of on our website, but I love that we've taken that and we've made that a part of it. And I'm just so excited that our whole kind of ethos is about putting Jesus in the centre of your life, and how incredible and how life-changing would it be if young people did that and learnt how to do that really well. And finally, I'm just really excited that it's going to be a safe space for young people to invite their friends who aren't Christians, who maybe are, and also we're all in different stages sometimes with our faith, but I'm excited for young people to come who maybe is just trying to figure this out, but just know that it's a safe space to go, okay, I want to ask some questions, or I want to know a bit more. But just that it's going to be about community and gathering, and that's just everything I love. So I'm so excited. It's going to be amazing. No pressure. No pressure.
Really, I think we should do a job.
Oh, thanks.
I love that. I mean, Martin, we talked about values, and we know you've been really carrying this, and this picture of a satellite is just so core to this, isn't it? That really is a driving metaphor, like the heart behind this. Like, do you want to just speak into that a bit more?
It's not space themed. I just very clearly, it's not space themed. Don't go out and spend money on like sci-fi costumes. Or anything. I'm really sorry. We're not doing space dressing up. But it's hopefully a helpful metaphor. I've been involved in youth ministry for 20 years, which makes me feel really old just saying that and realising what it means. But over that time, I think the thing that I've diagnosed, maybe one of the issues that you will identify with, is that young people experience Christian faith as just something at the periphery of their life, like just another lifestyle choice. I'm in the hockey team, and I also am part of church, and I'm part of the youth group, and it's kind of like those things are on a par. And I think that actually that's kind of what we've called, it's part of what we call moralistic therapeutic deism, the idea that God's just kind of there for me as just like a function, like Santa, when we need him, a part of our lives. And really the simple idea at the heart of Satellites, it's the big idea we have, it's very simple, is that we want to change, we want to flip that over. Instead of like us being at the centre and God being one of a number of things that orbit around the outside, we put God in his rightful place, the centre of our lives and young people's lives, and we invite them into this idea that they could see everything else through that lens, that God makes sense of everything else. God doesn't want to just be in a box over here in a young person's life with like the worship and the singing and the Bible reading and the prayer, but then over there's this separate box which is like relationships, and this other box which is called sport, and this other box which is video games. God wants to be at the centre of all of those things, not just our lives, but involved in all of those things. And he's passionate about the things that we're passionate about. He takes joy in the things. I think I love this metaphor from sport. This thing that Eric Liddell said: "When I run, I feel his pleasure." Do we teach that to young people? That like what you do on the football pitch, like there's a profoundly spiritual dimension.
Absolutely.
So that I don't think we do.
Absolutely.
And so the heart of this idea is really that we want to put God at the centre of young people's lives and help them to understand Christian faith like that.
Yes.
And so, we've got a whole bunch of values we're going to explore. Justice is one of them. Creativity is one of them. Family and community, worship, prayer, the power of the Holy Spirit. There's one more. Evangelism, that's very important. Those are kind of our key values. But kind of most important of all is this idea that your whole life matters to God. And it only really works, life in all its fullness works best when you kind of obey that first commandment, got there in the end, and put God right in the centre and have nothing else before him.
And to experience it, like Lucy was speaking so passionately about that, like that shift in thinking, like that actually we invite young people into, we love the phrase plausibility structure, that sense of, I know that maybe at the moment when you're at college or school or on the streets, it doesn't feel that plausible that you could live with God at the centre, that you might quite make the connection. But somehow there's some spaces, your youth ministry project being one of them, like conversations with your Christian mentor being one of them, this event, Satellites, being one of them, where actually this begins to make sense, like an experience, what it would be like to see justice through the lens of God being at the centre, to see community through the lens of that line. So I think it's so exciting. So I know that you are excited, everybody's excited about this, and people can get involved, like they can actually say, oh, I think we're on board with this. Martin,
well, we're not, so I'm going to get Natalie to do the how they do it.
Are you ready? Get yourself up for this.
But I think it's just worth saying. Are you with me still?
We are. Gearing her up.
It's worth saying, we don't know everything about how this event is going to look. We don't know yet who all the people who are speaking or what tents are going to go where or what it's going to look like. We know where it is. We know when it is, and it's not the 1st to the 4th of August. It's the 10th to the 14th of August. But we know what the heart of it is. It's about discipleship. It's about new vision for discipleship of young people. Yeah. And so, and it's not just about, it's an event really that lasts 5 days, but it's about the other 360 days. 360 degrees. It's like a orbit.
I mean, look at
what
this.
Is happening?
Like an orbit.
Pop.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
But we've got an offer, haven't we?
Yeah. We have. So if you're a youth leader, you can book on now, right this second, for just £25. I know, shocking.
Please do.
So you open your group and then you can add more people in later on.
It would be worth saying. It would be a huge encouragement to us as we sort of start to plan this event as a very small team, but very committed and passionate team, perhaps too passionate at times, as you've heard this evening. It would be a huge encouragement if you wanted to say to us this evening, I'm coming with you. Like that Jerry Maguire thing, where you could be Renee Zellweger with the goldfish.
You have
this evening.
Portaloos.
You could come on the journey. So you visit wheelsatellites.com.
Yes.
And you can sign up for £25.
It's going to be.
That's it.
Can't wait. Wonderful. Thank you, Natalie. That is absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. Well, so much to process tonight. So much that God has been stirring over this. It's only been 24 hours.
Yeah, can you believe it?
It's only been 24 hours, but as you say, this is not the end of the conversation. This is not the only place that this conversation is happening, but in our own place, in our own ways. I want to get in the car tonight and drive back to Preston, and I'm just so excited to see how God will unwrap this stuff and unravel this stuff and lead the church in Preston into this new future that He has for us. And I know that is your heart for the area that you come from. Colombia, South America, you still with us? Are you still here? It's so good that you're here. But tonight we have another amazing treat. Yeah. I mean, we say it's about everybody, but it's so true.
So I don't...
No, we don't.
The problem with saying you've saved the best till last is it makes an implication on everything else. So we're not saying that. But it is worth saying that we have reserved something incredibly special for the end of Now What. And this is a wonderful opportunity to hear a bit from Scripture and to hear from a wonderful communicator who has given his life to young people. Reverend Chris Russell is the vicar of St Lawrence's Reading, which is an amazing church, if you know it, which is really oriented around young people. And he's also, in his spare time, the Archbishop of Canterbury's advisor on mission and evangelism and witness, He's a great friend to Youthscape and he speaks incredibly powerfully here. Enjoy this, every word of it, from Reverend Chris Russell.
welcome to St Lawrence Reading. My name is Chris Russell and it is my privilege to be vicar here. We are a multi-generational community which seek to see non-church young people come to faith and build new forms of church with them. It's an absolute honour for me to speak on this Friday evening and to think about what now. It's clear, I think, around the world and certainly amongst our young people that the thought is that the timeline of humanity is divided into two, BC and AC, before Corona and after Corona. This time has been defining exams and school, illness, bereavement, anxiety, worry, concern. That thing called furloughing that no one knew it was even a word, and unemployment. Added to this, the spectre of that evil virus of racism that has claimed millions of lives over the decades and over the centuries. Added to this, individual acts of turmoil. I stand here in St Lawrence, less than 100 metres away from the Fulbury Gardens, where on the 20th of June this year, 3 men were murdered. Oh yeah, I can see how you would think that this time was the most defining time for humanity. But without minimising any of this, we are followers of Jesus Christ. And so we will insist on something different. That the world turns and that it hinges not on a deadly human virus in 2020, but on Jesus Christ's life, death, and resurrection. It is Jesus Christ who gives us somewhere to stand and something to say. Jesus Christ is our now what? And goodness, does God's world need to hear it and see it? And so, friends, who is going to live as if Jesus truly is the defining one? Who is going to proclaim his love as the most infectious of gifts? Who is going to grasp this opportunity with both hands? And whilst I don't want to get all drama about it, I want to steal a question from a book I read back in the day. If not us, who? And if not now, when? We do not choose the times in which we live, but we do choose the lives we live in the time allotted to us. So, what now? As I said, it's a massive privilege for me to seek to answer that question, and I want to do that just through setting up the difference between the baptism of John and the baptism of Jesus. John does it himself in Luke chapter 3, verse 16. John said to them all, "I baptize you with water, but one who is more powerful than I will come, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire." John's baptism was water. Water cleanses and washes the outside. John could tell people what needed cleaning, the outward things that needed addressing. He was diagnostic. He told people what was wrong. And in these last 5 months, we have seen much that is wrong. That there is no level playing field. We aren't all in the same boat. That the impact of this virus on the poor and the needy, on the elderly and the vulnerable, is exponential. We have had friends and relatives who have died. We have young families who have absolutely been pushed to the brink. There are households of our young people where members have lost their jobs. Our looked after young people are even more vulnerable than they were before, and from our young black men, we have heard stories of the amount of times they have been stopped and searched. Then there is all the economic hardship. There is school. There are households with loneliness. There's the questions of who we value. There's the questions of how we're governed. There's the questions of how judgmental and intolerant we are. Questions of sexism and prejudice. How some are discarded and some are elevated. Oh yeah, we can all join in the diagnostics. But it isn't enough just to diagnose. What we need is change. And who can bring that change? And if not us, who? And if not now, when? In this time, we haven't just experienced the baptism of John that has diagnosed things, but Jesus' baptism, which comes with fire. Water might clean the surface, but fire recreates. It melts things down. It reconstitutes things. It remakes. Haven't these last 5 months been for us a crucible where the fire of the Spirit has brought to the surface things that we can no longer ignore? Impurities, structural dysfunction, racism, sexism, our obsession in the church with ourselves and our own life and our own reputation. All that, when can we get back in the building to do what we want to do? But not just in church, not just in our systems and organisations, but in ourselves as individuals. For me, my self-centeredness, the poverty of my faith, my inability to hear God. And what happens in the crucible of this time is that the fire of Jesus remakes us. And Jesus' fire doesn't just warm us up. It's not just a nice glow to warm our hands with, but neither does it scorch us or harm us. It remakes us. All those references to fire, 362 throughout Scripture, are remaking. This is the fire of love, not just some random, inanimate thing, not just some experience, but the fire of love, which is always cross-shaped with Jesus. This is the baptism that Jesus refers to a number of times in his life, the baptism of his death, the fire of his love. This fire is stronger than the grave. It burns like a blazing fire. If you were to be offered all of the wealth in the world, you would scorn it because of this revolutionary, relentless, astounding, stronger than death love of God in Christ. And it is this love and this fire that defines all of human history. And this love is applied to our lives in the crucible of this time. It is not something abstract. It is not something that takes place in a different world. It is in our lives now. So this what now is about the fire of this love in our lives and in our ministry with young people. When Martin asked me to speak and to go last, I thought, okay, he's doing a reverse of the wedding in Cana and like serving the worst last. But also I was like, oh no, I've got to come up with a strategy. I've got to come up with a program. I've got to come up with something. And the temptation for us is to kind of think, oh, go dig deep, go inside, find something here or get something new. But no, this is not what I think we're called to. The what now is something that comes from outside of us. And it comes from God and it is his love. So let us herald the love of Christ in words and actions as the most powerful thing in the world. The what now isn't dig deep. The what now isn't find it in yourself. The what now is let's do Jesus Christ. In these last months, we have struggled desperately at St. Lawrence to try and find meaningful contact as a group of individuals, as a church with our young people. Our young people come from non-church backgrounds. It feels like they've dropped off the face of the planet. How can a generation so used to living online suddenly be offline when you want them to be online? So the only way I could get the boys group was to drive round on Monday during the day to knock on their doors and go, look, be on the screen at 4:30. And even then, like 3 of them never showed. And we met in this building at a socially distanced and all that kind of stuff, face masks last week. And I said to them, where were you all? Where have you all been? And they went, we can't do screens because we want to be present with one another. Here's what the Spirit inspires us to be: communities of love, communities of presence together, communities of cross-shaped love. This is more than words, this is action, because it is cross-shaped. It is sacrifice and it is cost. It is burden shouldering and weight bearing. It is accepting and forgiving, truth telling and redeeming love. It gives and believes and perseveres and insists. This love of Christ, this fire of the Spirit, is not one message amongst many in the world. This is unique to us, and there is no message like it. In the next couple of days, I'm going to lead the memorial service for the 3 men that were murdered in the Forbury. And whenever I do something like this, a big event, I remember a funeral I did for a 16-year-old in Reading who had been murdered. I worked really hard at the funeral. I tried to make it authentic and genuine. We used this 16-year-old's music, and tributes to him were paid. His trainers were on the coffin. But really, all I did at that funeral, it keeps me awake at night still, all I did at the funeral was I just stirred the pot of what was already there, of what people already had. What we did was we did the baptism of John, but not the baptism of Jesus. I didn't introduce anything new. You see, the fire of God's love isn't news you can get anywhere else. The gospel tells us something you don't pick up anywhere else. Netflix doesn't have it. TikTok doesn't have it, and Instagram certainly doesn't have it. This love of Christ isn't like anything else. It's true and it's good. It loves you for who you are, but loves you too much to leave you that way. Only this love teaches you who you truly are and calls you to be authentic to that. You only find out who you truly are in the arms of your Maker and Saviour, Jesus Christ. It is essential, young people, it's essential we tell young people about this, because they won't find out about it any other way. Young people, don't live an hour longer of your life without knowing the fire of this love remaking you. It is so good. And you can't get what you get from Jesus anywhere else. This love doesn't just tell you stuff. It isn't just diagnostic. It remakes you. It changes you. Because this fire of Jesus' love is cross-shaped and resurrection-shaped. Who will proclaim this? Who will live this? If not us, who? And if not now, when? And it is baptism, this fire, because it is utterly consuming. In our what now, can we please be done with trying to restrict the fire of God's love to one compartment of life? Can we stop introducing Jesus as a religious add-on, as some option for the interested? We have allowed the world to dictate to us the place that faith should have as an add-on, as if that is all there is. But no, because of Jesus Christ, we will say no. We will stand in all of life. We will have it all. Can the day come soon that we have to stop making excuses for a church which hasn't let this fire utterly remake it? It's racism, it's sexism, it's ambition, it's self-regard, it's self-defensiveness. Can we be done with hoping that people will just turn a blind eye, that the words we say are different than what we seem to believe? Can we insist that church budgets are our faith written in figures, and that cuts to ministry with young people aren't really financial decisions, they are theological ones? Can we grasp the challenge and invitation of this time? And if not now, when? And if not us, who? Can we let young people lead the way in ministry to this world? And through these remade young people who've been remade by the love and fire of Jesus Christ, we see the world remade. That's why we're remade. We're remade in order to remake the world. to take Jesus' ministry of making all things new out into the world. Pope Francis says that Jesus' words in Revelation chapter 3 about knocking on the door, he said Jesus is knocking on the door, but he's knocking on the door of the church asking to be let out. Jesus let out into the world the fire of love, changing, remaking things, not just diagnosing what's wrong, but remaking it. Surely in these last months, what we've done outside of our building shows some new possibilities that if we only keep doing what we're doing, who are we not going to reach? We must do new things. What now? We will move when he calls us, and we will stay when he tells us. We will love and we will care. We will pray and we will wait. We will speak and we will listen. We will insist and we will understand. We will forgive and we will draw lines. We will trust and we will risk. We will imagine and we will give away. We will live remade lives with our young people which remake the world, and we will leave everything on the pitch to see a generation of young people lead this world into God's future, armed only and empowered only with the fire of his love, which is his spirit within us. We will live the baptism of Jesus. If not us, who? And if not now, when?
Wow. So thank you so much, Chris, for sharing that. I don't know about you, but that has spoken so powerfully to us, to the team here. And we felt actually incredibly moved by what Chris said right at the end there. In fact, it felt like he was kind of calling out something quite prophetic to us as a youth ministry community. Yeah. And so what we thought we might do, actually, if you don't mind, is we might use that form of words that Chris just ended with there as a kind of closing liturgy for Now What? A closing statement for us to agree together as the youth ministry tribe about the future that we want to see and the future that we want to be a part of coming out of this extraordinary time. And so this is our response to that question that we've been asking for the last 24 hours. Now what? And we've gathered a few people here, so you don't feel weird, so we don't feel weird. And we're going to say this together. It's just going to come up on the screen. I'd encourage you, if you're on your own, or if you are with people, just speak these words out as a prayer. Let's all do it together. Rachel's going to lead us here.
And just take, you might want to move like where you're sitting. You might want to shift yourself around to be looking out the window, thinking the young people that God's called me to serve, I'm going to speak this as a manifesto, a declaration of heart and of will. So just give you a little moment just to gather yourself as we say this together. And in a minute, I'm going to lead us. So just take a moment, just a pause. Just call to mind the faces, the names of young people that you have the privilege to serve, that they would know this love of Christ, that Christ's love never fails, the defiance of that. His love never fails. So let's say together, what now? We will move when he calls us and stay when he tells us. We will love and care. We will pray and wait. We will speak and insist. We will forgive and draw lines. We will trust and give away. We will live remade lives with our young people, which remake the world. And we will leave everything on the pitch to see a generation of young people lead us into God's future, armed with the fire of his love. we will live the baptism of Jesus. If not us, who? And if not now, when? Amen.
Wow. Wow.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, friends.
Well, that feels like a really great way
to
end our time together at Now What.
Yeah.
We hope this has been a really helpful and powerful time for you. It certainly has been for us.
For us, extraordinary for us.
Here.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for being a part of it. There's a few people, just as we really end this, that we just want to thank. We've had an amazing team behind the scenes here, which you won't have obviously been able to see. You've just been looking at us, sorry, for the last 24 hours. But there's an amazing team who've been putting in weeks of work. I think the idea for Now What probably sprung up 4 or 5 weeks ago. And in that time, we've called in loads of favours. We've asked people to step in at last minute. People have dropped things to be on Zoom calls and things.
So grateful.
And behind the scenes here, team have been giving it, we've done really long days for the last few days. A few people, particularly, I won't name people, but an amazing team. They know who they are. We're incredibly grateful for them. And thank you to you for sort of tuning in, getting involved, for your comments, your questions, your grace. You've been amazing as a sort of a community. It's felt very different as a way of doing an event.
Felt really rich, hasn't it? It's that extraordinary and a beautiful moment. And like our prayer for you is whatever happens next for you, whether like you've got to go and settle older kids in bed, or you've got to go and do the washing, or those situations that we feel can sometimes take us out of this. Like, this is a call on our lives. Like, nothing takes us out of this. And our prayer for you is, just as you've spoken this over young people as your declaration, may you know that God speaks this fierce, defiant love over you. You are not alone. You are never alone. And as we live the baptism of Jesus, we're going to be able to witness that great privilege of witnessing what Jesus does, what only he can do. Isn't it great that we get to do this together? So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. Now What? You can catch up on all of the talks, all the content from the last 24 hours will be on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll be contacting you about that. We'll also be letting you know about a quick survey, which we'd love you to do as we think about whether we do events like this in the future. Please fill that in. But for now, go well. Even if you're just going a few feet to your fridge at this point, go well. And we will hope to see you soon.
Yeah.